It's working.
We're off. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm going to do a presentation about businesses getting back to work. Be followed by Vin, who's going to do about working from home. And as part of that, we're going to have a look at kind of what's going to happen in terms of offices, factories, buildings, working from home, and also travel, getting to and from work. The coronavirus has obviously had a massive effect on everybody personally. There's been kind of so many deaths, so many people unemployed, out of work, worried, anxious. Kind of life is very much not normal. So we all kind of know about the kind of emotional impact of that on friends and family and people we know. It's also having a kind of massive effect on the economy. So at the moment, there are 6.3 million employees furloughed, which is 23% of the labour force. And the whole economic output of the country is expected to fall by 15% this quarter. And there's kind of massive changes in consumer spending. So kind of the world's kind of been on pause a little bit over the last 6 or 7 weeks while I've been trying to kind of deal with the virus. And now we're kind of looking to how to kind of get back to work and get the economy going again. Our dear leader, Boris, delivered his speech on Sunday night, announcing his kind of roadmap back. That's some lovely hearts, like that. His guidance on Friday was somewhat unclear, most people found. And I believe some people did try to turn up to work on Monday when nobody was there to expect them. But there's been a kind of plethora of publications come out in the last 24 hours providing more kind of detail. And that's what I'll be going through just now. So the steps for the adjustment to how to get back to work. So the government's looking at a 3-step phase. Basically, as the virus dissipates, freedoms will return to the population, people will be able to go back to work. And it basically just depending on the rate of reinfection between people. So it's a 3-step guide. Basically, as time goes on, we'll be able to kind of exercise and spend more time outdoors. Step 2, primary schools will go back, retail shops will open. And step 3, kind of more general opening of business. So under the government guidelines from tomorrow, Wednesday, the current guidance is workers should basically work from home wherever possible. If you can't work from home, if you work in a factory or a research department or a museum or something like that, then you should only travel to work if your workplace is open. And basically from Wednesday, it's basically food retailers, garden centres and hardware stores that can open up. All hospitality, non-essential retail businesses must remain closed. So that's your bars, restaurants, high street fashion shops. None of them can open yet. So they'll follow under the next part of the guidance, which is from the 4th of June. So this is depending on how the virus dissipates. The government thinks that by the 4th of June, they should be able to open non-essential retail, which is basically kind of your fashion shops, and also hold cultural and sports events behind closed doors. And then if the virus dissipates even further as time goes on, potentially from the 1st of July, they're looking at opening up a sort of more general businesses, dealing with personal care, hospitality and leisure that were previously instructed to close by the government. That reopening is all subject to individual risk assessments of each business. So each business will have to kind of assess its own requirements. It is very unlikely that nightclubs on the King's Road are going to reopen very quickly because they're going to packed environment that doesn't suit social distancing. So I don't think there's any chance a place like that will be opening anytime soon after the 1st of July, and they're going to follow later as the virus dissipates. When's things going to go back to normal? Probably not for a long time. So in the government guidelines, they are looking at basically the only a vaccine or a treatment for the virus is the only way we're going to get life back to normal. A vaccine or a treatment for the virus could take months, it could take years. We might have to live with this for a long, long time. Things are not going to go back to normal. We just have to try and work around it as best as we can. One of the kind of things about working from, well, things not being able to go back to work, is there's going to be much more working from home going forward. So the world has changed and working from home is here to stay much more. So we've all tried it over the last 5 or 6 weeks with kind of various degrees of success. We need to look now at changing the way we work from home, what technology we're using, how we communicate with the office and other colleagues, how employees are managed while they're working from home, and how their kind of performance is monitored and they're appraised. So Vin, my colleague, is going to talk all about this and how to help people work effectively from home. But this is what's going to be the big thing going forward for potentially a long, long time. People are going to be working from home, and they're going to be working from home for a long time. So what I want to talk about is getting back to work. And kind of the kind of key points are anyone who's got any signs of having coronavirus should stay at home under all circumstances. Everybody should avoid getting on public transport where possible. And if you're in enclosed spaces, such as you're on the public transport, wear a face covering. Those are kind of the 3 basic principles. For getting back to work, employers have basically got a responsibility to protect your workers and need to carry out a risk assessment of what risks there are to employees in the workplace. If you have 5 or fewer employees, you don't have to document it. If you've got 5 or more employees, you need to have a written risk assessment of how you're going to deal with the coronavirus. If you've got more than 50 employees, you need to publish the risk assessment on your website. So the Health and Safety Executive have got some guidance on that, which was released yesterday. There's a link to that at the bottom of the slide there, www.hse.gov.uk risk assessment. And so we can email the links out to you after this. As part of going back to work, we've got public transport. I think the Mayor of London has said we can occupy, the public transport can operate at about 15% of capacity while social distancing is going on. So getting people to and from work is going to be difficult. Employees are probably at home at the moment. When they're thinking about going back to work, they're probably going to be very anxious. How can we mitigate that? That's through things like safety, using masks, sanitizers, giving them PPE type equipment. Consider what time people are traveling at. So maybe change shift patterns. People are going early in the morning, late in the afternoon, so not in peak hours. And then either cycling or walking, which is going to be suggested by the government. It's going to be a way around this. And there is a cycle to work scheme where your employer can buy a bike for you, and you can basically cycle to work at a very efficient cost. It's basically works quite well for tax wise. That's going to have a massive, great big growth. But as part of getting people going back to work, because there is anxiety, there's going to be people who aren't going to want to travel on the ground. Employers need to be very clear about communicating with your staff what their responsibilities are. why do they need to go into the work? Because if they're worried about it, can they stay and work from home for longer? There's kind of lots and lots of factors here. The main one is the London Underground tube network is going to be very, very busy because it's going to be limited the number of people that are on it. So I think working from home, where possible, needs to be done. At the workplace, the main issue here is going to be 2-meter social distancing, which has to apply. So think of your office, think of your factory, think of your workshop, wherever it is you work. How is that going to apply if you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 people? They're all going to be 2 meters apart. They shouldn't be face to face, so you can have people sitting back to back or side to side. You need to have floor markings. One-way system, if you've got a shared office, that sort of thing, maybe you have a one-way system so people can walk around one way. Lifts are probably going to be out of operation because you can't social distance in a lift. What you're going to do with the canteen when staff are going in there making tea and coffee and stuff, they're going to be things. This is all part of the kind of the risk assessment the employer has to do for getting people back into work, and all these factors you have to consider. Back at work, we've got density to think about. How can we limit the number of people that are close together? So the only ways to do that is to have people working different days, different hours, kind of rotating things. The government is suggesting that you should have pairs or groups of people who are in the office on the same day every day and kind of rotate, but there's no interaction between the two groups, because that reduces any kind of possible risk of catching coronavirus from one different group to another group. So kind of individual groups of people going to attending the office at the same time. Hot desking is out. I think in the current environment, nobody can hot desk effectively, just because the cleaning and hygiene aspect of it. How I think about the cleaning the office. I think Crop Factory, at the moment, most businesses probably have cleaners coming in once a day, once a week or something like that. And these are going to be more often now. You need to have sanitizer and hand wash facilities in the office, and kind of clear communication with staff as to what their responsibilities are. They need to understand if they've got symptoms of coronavirus, they shouldn't be in the office at all. If they've got any symptoms at all, they should be at home. They need to understand what their responsibilities are for kind of cleaning and tidying up and trying to maintain social distance. And also deal with vulnerable staff who maybe got illness or something like that, and maybe kind of deal with them as kind of as carefully and cautiously, maybe keep them working from home if at all possible. Well, kind of loads and loads of things to think about, which are all kind of part of the risk assessment that you have to carry out. As part of the kind of back to work regime from the government, there are 8 specific guides they've got covering construction, working from home, labs and research for these offices. Basically, the government's got a specific guide for each of these industries. There's a link there at the bottom of the slide to where you can find it. So it's gov.uk guidance, working safely during coronavirus. So it came out yesterday. Everybody should read that, and how it impacts your business. It's very important. There's also a staying COVID-19 secure in 2020 safety certificate, which the government is encouraging people to do. So when you've actually carried out your risk assessment, you can put this poster up on your wall in the office, and people will know that you're going to consider the matter and you're doing everything to maintain social distancing and hygiene and reducing the possibility of anybody encountering coronavirus. And I've now got to me. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about that? I can't actually see the group chat, Nicola, for some reason.
No, I don't see any questions so far. We have just had 2 people just join us. So I don't know if they've got any questions that because they've missed it, but we will be recording this. And
okay, well, I'll hand over to Vin, and he can do the bit about working from home, and then we can have some questions at the end if anybody's not clear on anything.
Perfect, thank you, Michael. I'm just going to try and share my screen, so bear with me. There we go. Let's see if you can see that. Hopefully you guys can all see that.
I can see it.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. So, thank you, Michael, for that. That was a nice summary of some of the key aspects. I think there's quite a lot more information to be shared from the government on practical steps to be taken when people are coming back into the office. So we'll wait and see what happens then. So I'll kick this off. This is my short presentation on some tips to help keep staff safe, secure and productive when working from home. I think, as Michael has already pointed out, it's quite clear that remote working is going to be here to stay. It's probably going to become the new normal, as we'd expect. And certainly, even when people do go back to work and are fully productive, I'd expect some of those staff members are likely to be asking to be able to work from home now that they've proved that they're as productive, if not more so, than actually being in the office. So this is just designed as a broad guidance. I believe, Nicola, that we can share these slides afterwards. So there's probably no need to take any notes. There will be some nuggets in there, hopefully just a couple of things that might pique your interest and might be worth considering, certainly to share with staff in terms of some of the best ways to remain productive and secure. So this is what we'll cover very quickly, a quick introduction on us, what the current security risks are out there, because it's plain to see that, that's a big subject at the moment. And then I'll share my top tips on remote working and then open it up for questions. Again, if there's any questions at the end, we can certainly cover some questions or any queries related to Michael's presentation as well. Okay, so very quickly, WEM Technology, we're a Microsoft Gold partner and a cloud solution provider. We've been on the board actually for the Kensington Chamber of Commerce for 21 years nearly, perhaps not as long as Michael. But yes, I've served as past chairman and past president and remain on the board to hopefully assist businesses in the borough achieve more. So broadly speaking, we've been using technology to help businesses grow for over 21 years. So let's move on to the current security risks. You're probably all aware, and it's been in the news quite a bit, that the internet is actually drowning in lots of COVID-19 related malware and phishing scams. So this is something that absolutely everyone needs to be aware of, because criminals are actually using the scares and the pandemic to get hold of loopholes or take advantage of vulnerable people. And certainly, you know, even Google have blocked lots of phishing scams in the past week. This is a few weeks ago. And then even Zoom, what we're using now, isn't necessarily secure. So my advice is, if you're using Zoom, make sure you're not sharing any sensitive information on it. Although Zoom is perfectly normal to be used by everyone on a normal day-to-day basis, just be aware that, you know, hackers are out there and they're stealing these credentials. These credentials that they're looking for, and they're doing phishing attacks, are a combination of your email address and your passwords. So you're all probably very aware of how to spot phishing emails. There's a few obvious signs that you can look at. And as I said, we'll share this slide or this deck with you. But there's a few clues here, for example, as in bad grammar, urgency, bad links. You can hover your mouse above these links to see where they actually go, to see if they are actually genuine. Even if you could try, for example, sending off an email to your staff and just have the subject of, you know, Q1 payroll employee summary as an attachment, I'm sure that you'll find some of your staff will will be keen enough and curious enough to open it, even if it's malicious. So hackers use those same techniques. So coming on to hacked passwords, it's very important to know that while the National Security Centre has been carrying out studies, they've also shown that there is a list of hacked passwords which are in common use. And a lot of people still use these passwords, which is unbelievable. The guidance states that you should use always a strong password, of course, but it's clear that there are still a lot of people using passwords which are fairly weak. I'll also go on to say that the threat isn't a case of if, it's a case of when. So these are some examples of all of the companies that have been hacked, where email and password combinations have been leaked or stolen. And you've probably used some of these services, you know, Ticketmaster, British Airways, but even the HMRC itself and the DVLA and banks, Thomas Cook, they've all been breached. So the problem is that more and more, we're finding that people are actually becoming desensitized to these hacks, perhaps saying, oh, I don't care if someone hacks my credentials, it's not important, what have I got that's of value to any hackers? But certainly, you know, some of these things can allow access into your bank accounts and things like that. So what happens when your credentials are compromised? They're actually put on a place called the dark web, and the dark web is an interesting place. It's actually perhaps 1,000 times bigger than the internet that you have access to on a daily basis. It's much bigger, and it actually runs underneath your browsers, so you can't actually see it using a normal browser. And it's a place where hackers and criminals can exchange information, buy and sell drugs, or exchange goods and services. And they've even got marketplaces such as Amazon, where they have reviews from happy buyers. So, you know, it's following the concept of Amazon and eBay, but it's all underground for illicit goods. And actually, when they get hold of your credentials, you'll see here that this is from February 2019. There's a dark web market price index for your bank details or your credit card information, and there's a value attached to that. So your bank details may be worth an average of £347 to a hacker. Given that, $1,200 is what it's been worked out as your credentials are worth on the dark web. So if they have your Netflix, your Spotify and an Apple account, for example, then on average that's worth about $28 to hackers or to criminals. So that's something worth bearing in mind. So we'll move on to our top tips to help your staff stay safe, secure and productive whilst they're working from home. It's not an exhaustive list, it's not meant to be. It's just to give you some food for thought, and certainly hopefully will be useful to aid you when working from home. And I'm sure you've got many, many more of your own. So let's go to tip one. It's actually how you work. Ideally, you know, it's important to set up a designated workspace. It allows you to be focused, and if you've got a comfortable chair, it's important because posture is certainly important. Equally, setting up a designated workspace is probably more important if you've got kids and other people in the household who may be disturbing you on a regular basis. One of my top tips is certainly to get dressed and have a routine as if you're really going to work. You know, it puts you in the right frame of mind. It allows you to mentally switch into productive mode, and then helps you separate from work and life balance. So working in pajamas and not showering isn't ideal or conducive, but certainly it's useful to have a routine. If you've got big projects, what I like to do, and some of the more productive people that I've been looking at, find it much easier to dive into their to-do list as soon as they wake up. So you can have a coffee or whatever, but simply getting a project started first thing in the morning it can be quite key to making progress on it. And otherwise, you know, you'll prolong breakfast and let the morning sluggishness kick in. So it's a good idea to start working on those projects early and use breakfast as a reward when you've hit that wall, for example, or you need a break. Finish work on time, that's absolutely vital. And obviously, communicating with your teams is key. We're going to suggest avoiding social media. You may want to turn it off if you've got to get your head stuck into an important project. But above all, you've got to take breaks regularly, exercise and eat well. certainly I'm loving being at home because we're enjoying some good quality home cooked food, and even the exercise regime is very important for your mental well-being. So the right equipment. Now I know Nicola also has not only just a comfortable chair, but we were talking earlier about the importance of the right equipment. And I think in terms of the equipment to have to make you productive, if you're using a laptop, try plugging in or buying a fairly cheap external keyboard and mouse. It makes a world of difference because the touchpad on the laptop is fairly small. Equally, as I was saying about Nicola and I, we've invested in dual screens. It means you can become more productive. You can have a spreadsheet or your email on one screen and certainly have your productivity software on another. It just means that you get more done. Now, you've probably all noticed as well that I've got a pair of headphones on. A good pair of headphones is essential if you want to ensure that you've got good quality without any other noises distracting out there. So certainly I'd recommend a good pair of headphones with a microphone. And this one is really important. Make sure if you've got important video calls to deal with, turn off anything else that's connected to the internet. So you may have kids with an Xbox, for example, which is constantly updating throughout the day. If they're not essential to be turned on during this important time that you need to make these calls, then consider turning them off. In fact, it was quite funny because I saw that one of the MPs at question time in the Commons today was unable to ask their question because they didn't have the internet bandwidth for that video call. So they never got to ask an important question. Certainly a lot of people like to have a physical handset as well. And these VoIP handsets allow you to make and receive those calls with a full handset. Okay, hopefully I'm not going too fast or too slow and this is all fairly well paced, but put your hand up or stop me if you need to. Okay, so minimum standards for any remote workers. Obviously it's quite key. Remote workers ideally should be having or using a company managed workstation or at least a personal device with the latest operating system. There's no point running Windows 7 anymore, although you may like it. Microsoft will stop putting out patches for that in due course. And attackers are aware of the holes and can take advantage of them, so it's important to have the latest, greatest. Always have the latest software and always ensure that your computer is being patched within the last 30 days. I think it's important as well, while we're on this, if you're using Adobe or any other software, even video editing software, there are updates that you need to consider for that as well. So keep those up to date. Antivirus, absolutely essential as well. Okay, Wi-Fi. Now this is one of my bugbears and it's very, very important. So I'm going to say at the outset, I'm going to recommend you all avoid public Wi-Fi. Public Wi-Fi, by its very nature, is inherently insecure and it can be spoofed by anyone in between. So imagine that you've got Joe, you go to Joe's Cafe, for example, and you routinely connect to Joe's Cafe because they've got Wi-Fi. You can actually have a button on your laptop which says connect automatically when you're in the cafe. But a hacker can also set up a new Wi-Fi network, which is also Joe's Cafe. So be aware that any public Wi-Fi can have what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. We'd recommend turning off auto-connect to these memorized wireless networks. It's fairly important to do that. Even on your mobile phone is constantly searching out for other networks it can connect to, and that can drain some battery, but also it can be a risk. You've probably got some smart doorbells at home or some CCTV, even some robot vacuums. The important thing to consider with all of those is to make sure that you've changed the default login, username and password. Most people don't, and actually a lot of these are made in China, these CCTVs, and you'll find that if someone is able to look at your network and say, oh, there's a CCTV on there, chances are 90% of cameras are made by the same companies and use the same firmware. So be aware that they can gain access to your network and even monitor your cameras from anywhere in the world. There are even websites online where you can go to where you can just type in, okay, I want to see some unsecure webcams in London, for example, and it will show you insecure webcam footage, which is obviously a risk if you've got small children. If you're unsure about Wi-Fi, maybe you can tether your laptop to your mobile phone so that you're using your mobile data instead. And if you've got an important video call and your Wi-Fi isn't good enough, then I'm going to recommend you plug in a network cable if you know that that video call coming up is very important and you can't afford to lose that deal. Plug a network cable in instead. Okay, accessing your data. Make sure your office is already configured with any corporate firewall policies, etc. Always use a VPN when you're outside the office. You should never, ever allow data to be transferred to any personal device. This is absolutely vital. If corporate information is leaked to a personal computer and that employee leaves, then they've actually got your entire company data. So effectively, it's a risk. Equally, personal devices, you tend to be using them for other things, some of which may not necessarily be safe. Always use two-factor authentication. Now, I'm going to mention something about websites and your banking, for example. If you haven't already, please set up two-factor authentication for PayPal and your bank accounts so that it sends you a little ping to your mobile phone with a text message or a code that you can then type in. That's two-factor authentication. It's vital you do that. And equally, I'm just going to come on to another point. When we've seen scams take place where it looks like the CEO has asked Susan in accounts to make an urgent payment of £10,000, that's phishing, and it's designed to fool Susan into making that payment. What I recommend, just as an aside, is if you run a business and you regularly make transactions on behalf of your suppliers or to your suppliers, perhaps consider having two people authorize a payment if it's over a certain amount. So perhaps if it's over £3,000, have two signatories on that account so that that transaction is authorized. That way, you know, it's the burden doesn't necessarily fall solely on Susan. Certainly use two-factor if you're using Office 365. You must set Office 365 two-factor authentication up. It's essential because actually Office 365 is the biggest hacked system in the world. They can easily get access to your emails. They can watch any transactions you're doing. And so, for example, if you're doing some conveyancing for a new property, they can intercept your solicitor's correspondence and swap the bank details out for any payments that you need to make. For example, a deposit for that house. Now, contrary to popular belief, I'm going to recommend, and I think a lot of other big companies are now recommending the same as well, including Microsoft, use a strong password and don't change it often. You've probably heard before, lots of people telling you, change your password often. But in our experience, what that means is that most people change one character. Rather than create a brand new password, they're being lazy and just adding a 1 or a 2 or a 3 on the end. Our advice is use a strong password to start with. It could be a phrase with many words in it. It could be a sentence that only you know. But if you've got a strong password, then you don't need to change it often. And of course, if you're accessing any data, ensure that that data is backed up, especially Office 365. Most people assume that any data in Office 365 is backed up by Microsoft. It's not. Any data is still the responsibility of you. And if you do have to share your devices or your iPads with your children or your kids or a colleague, then use a separate login. Okay. So, laptops, USB drives, encryption. If I was to leave a USB drive lying around in Starbucks on the floor, or in a hotel lobby, or in your office hallway at reception, I'm pretty sure someone will pick it up and plug it in because they're curious. It's human nature. So never trust unknown USB devices. That's the first thing. Always encrypt any device containing any data. So your laptop is absolutely vital. All laptops, if you carry them anywhere, they can be stolen, they can be left on trains. You've got to ensure that if a hacker gets access to your device physically, they can't get access to the data within it. Never leave laptops and tablets in cars. You've probably heard and seen instances where criminals have used some clever devices to scan your car for electronic equipment, even if your laptop is turned off. So we have evidence of people, in fact, this happened to me. Many years ago, I left a laptop, it was turned off in a car, came back, only minutes later, bang, it had gone. Luckily, that laptop had been encrypted, so I know that hackers couldn't get access to any data, but it is still a pain in the butt. And always consider any connections to be unsafe unless they've been specifically secured via a VPN. So we talked a little bit about training and what you need to be aware of. Ultimately, the best protection you can have is your staff and your awareness. As the new mantra goes, stay alert. Everyone needs alert. So you've got to remain vigilant when reading any emails, text messages. Specifically, I would encourage you to speak to the older generation, your parents and anyone else who may be more vulnerable to these type of scams, because they may get a text message which looks like it's HMRC, which is saying that you've underpaid tax. And these are common techniques used by hackers, so be aware and please share the message to remain vigilant. Training quizzes and any security awareness training is essential, but it should be bite-sized, engaging, short. And above all, the CEO himself needs to be targeted with these phishing simulations, because it's the CEO of a company that we find thinks they're immune and can open up any attachment or clicking on any website. They think that their systems are going to protect them. So if you're going to use any security awareness training, think about targeting your C-level executives above all. It's a good idea to have a clean desk policy, and then make sure you've got reporting in place to ensure that training is happening. Excuse me. And obviously quizzes make these more enjoyable. Right. I don't need to dwell on this too long, and we're certainly almost there, so bear with me. There's a website, Have I Been Pawned, which will allow you to see if your email passwords have already been exposed by the hackers. So if you were using British Airways and British Airways was compromised, that list of email addresses and passwords will be made available on the dark web. Now, this is a point-in-time snapshot that just allows you to verify and see what breaches this individual person has put on this Have I Been Pwned website. But if you're corporate and you want to take this more seriously, then like us, we have a dark web monitoring service, which we are engaged by banks and companies to do, which allows us to be alerted by the system to let us know before anyone else knows that new breaches have been detected. And certainly, just coming back to that point, under your GDPR requirements, you are required to monitor breaches. Something that's very important also is if you've got people who have left your business and you've got to disable their account. Far too many times we see, accounts still live for people that have left many years ago. So make sure they're removed promptly, and never ever use your email address that you use for work on other websites such as Amazon just to buy toner. And try and, if you can, use a different password for different services. So I use a password manager, which means I don't know what my passwords are. I log into my password manager, and then it in turn logs me into these websites with a secure password. So there's no point me memorizing all of these different passwords. In terms of remaining productive for your staff, one great tool is Microsoft Teams. I'm going to recommend that you start considering that if you aren't already using it. It's a great way for your remote staff to all stay in touch and collaborate on projects, etc. You have instant chat with your colleagues and can even invite external consultants and parties to the conversation. It allows video conferencing. You can make and receive phone calls, but you can also work on the same document together in the same Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to suggest something else alongside that, is to schedule virtual lunches. So there's no need to use these tools just for work purposes. You can actually say, hey, let's all grab lunch. Let's have a video call like we're doing today, and let's talk about something else other than work while we're eating a lunch. It improves morale and helps your employees feel a lot more valued. I'm just going to mention there as well, if you're not using Microsoft Teams, it's available at no charge for the next 6 months. So you may want to reach out and have a look at that. My last tip is actually to see if you can make remote working work for you instead. So change where you sit, mix it up a little bit, put on music if you want to, help you get things done if it helps with your productivity, and be grateful for the fact that you don't have a commute and you can wear comfortable shoes finally. and you've got your home comforts. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to give you some useful resources here, which are some tips on cybersecurity. There's the link for trying out Microsoft Teams if you'd like to for the next 6 months. That's just a slide. It's a little bit more technical, but certainly security in your office, now that everyone is returning or thinking about returning to work under Michael's presentation, there are other aspects you need to consider as well as these that I've highlighted for your office. And that's pretty much it. So I think we're both ready for questions. I hope that was useful. There's a free guide available on the website if you're interested as well. And I think that's the last slide. So Nicola, over to you if there's any questions or anything else, and I hope that was useful.
I've got a question to ask. You mentioned double encryption from a laptop or a tablet, but most of us, our mobile phones access our work email as well. And I've only got a 4-digit password or my thumbprint on that. Should you be doing an authentication on that? I mean, you can't encrypt your mobile phone, can you?
Well, your mobile phone is in theory, it's encrypted to an extent in that if you're using Apple or Android, then there are some controls in place to protect the data that's on it. If my advice is that use a thumbprint or a PIN that only you know to gain access to your phone. What that does is it authenticates you as the user as owning that phone and then allows you access to your applications. In terms of email, your email is already authenticated to your phone in most cases. And if you try to log into a new device using your email, chances are Microsoft or whoever will send you a PIN code to say, hey, you've just set up a new device, is this true? But in addition to all of that, I would still maintain that you should have a secondary thumbprint or secure access if you're using your banking app, or if you're using PayPal, make sure that you use a thumbprint or whatever, and that it pings you once you've logged in to make sure that it is you making that transaction. So yes, that you've got the layers of security with your phone, but ensure you're starting by making sure that when your phone is turned on or you hit the screen, that it prompts you for a PIN.
How do you know that your laptop is encrypted?
So you can encrypt your laptop if your laptop has what's called a security chip on the motherboard. So this is a little bit more technical, but most manufacturers are now shipping laptops with this security built in, and it's part of the specification. So have a look at the model of the laptop that you have.
Yeah.
Look it up online.
Yeah.
And the phrase you're looking for is a TPM module, which is Tango Papa Mike, and it stands for Trusted Platform Module. And it's basically a security chip. And what that allows it to do is to say, okay, I've got the security module embedded in this device, encrypt this hard drive with only the key that I know. So this may be a phrase or a passcode, but then keep a copy of that key somewhere safe, not on the laptop or not on a post-it note. I'm not sure where to recommend for that actually, maybe an encrypted USB drive or a vault.
That's the thing. I have password managers because I'm considering using that. You have to pay to subscribe to it. Have they ever been hacked?
Password managers are also dangerous, but they're less dangerous than a lot of other things. So my concern has been that password managers, the data is stored on someone else's server. It may be, LastPass, for example, or Passportal, or any of the other ones. But they assure that the data is encrypted when it's on your computer. It's encrypted when it's transmitted to their data center. And it's encrypted again when it's at rest in their data center. There's still a danger that they could get hacked. Yes, absolutely. So even if you're using a password manager, you still need to ensure that you've got a secondary level of authentication on your phone for a ping or a text message to verify it's you for anything that's sensitive, such as banking information.
Okay.
So assume that password managers inherently are not safe either. They are safer than everything else. And you know, who knows? That could also get hacked at some point as well. So exercise caution.
Right, does anybody else want to ask a question?
Alexa devices, I can see here is a question, Nicola.
Yes, I asked if my Alexa was draining the broadband width.
Yes, absolutely. It's sending data back and forth. It's probably not huge amounts of information, but if you choose to ask Alexa to start playing Metallica or stream some music, then yes, you can imagine that's going to take some bandwidth. Equally, Alexa is designed to be waiting there for a response from you, but it's also, you know, a corporate device which is there to gather data. So just be aware, but certainly change the password on it if you haven't.
And Sebastiano wanted to ask a question too. Does using a VPN reduce your bandwidth?
Well, using a VPN is safer too, because it should be hiding your IP basically.
Not necessarily just your IP, so it's also encrypting the traffic. So the VPN is important because it provides a secure connection between me and where I'm connecting to. If anyone tries to intercept that traffic, because it's encrypted, they can't see what it is. Whereas right now we've got a Zoom connection going on. You know, my laptop is connected to the internet. Anyone can potentially hack that or look at it. And there are ways to also scan that traffic as well to make sure it's safe. But a VPN doesn't necessarily take up that much more bandwidth. It is a lot safer and secure if you're connecting to your corporate head office from a home device to ensure that you have a VPN connection, which is basically a direct connection to your office, and it's encrypted. Obviously, you can imagine if you wanted to access or watch a video or do something online, then you're going through other people's equipment effectively to get there. So there's no point-to-point connection in reality. You are going through hops on the internet, from BT to TalkTalk to EE to, you know, out to the website provider themselves. And because of the number of hops in between, you can't guarantee that each of those hops is secure. Whereas if you have a VPN, then it creates a tunnel through all of those providers to your endpoint so that it's a one-to-one connection that you know is encrypted. It's not 100% guaranteed, of course, but it's a lot safer if you're carrying out sensitive transactions or working with sensitive information, then it's always wise to use a VPN.
And it doesn't affect the speed of your work, basically.
No, it shouldn't. There is a slight overhead when you use a VPN, but it's insignificant. It used to be very significant in the old days when we had slow internet, but now it's a very small overhead, and it's worth the extra amount of data on top to make sure that everything is encrypted.
Richard Johnson asks, so are you saying we should use password managers, or have you concluded the risks aren't worth the convenience?
We should use password managers if you're using websites and logging in, very often into the same websites, which we often do on a daily basis in our industry. Then it's far easier to use a password manager, which has authenticated us before we've used it. So first thing in the morning, I can open up my browser, and my password manager only goes red and activated once I've authenticated with my mobile phone. And once I've done that, then it will automatically log me into my normal day-to-day websites without me having to know any passwords. If you're only using the same websites on a daily basis and they're just few and far between, you know your Amazon password, for example, and you're good at memorizing passwords, then absolutely, you may not need a password manager. But my advice is you shouldn't even need to know what password you're using. So a password manager takes away the pain of having to remember a password or even write it down on a post-it note. That's the worst thing you can do, is write down a password on a post-it note.
Also, things like Google, which I use quite a lot,
Bless you.
that recommends that remembers all your passwords for you. That seems inherently hackable.
It does, but what Google claim to do is make sure that their Chrome browser is more secure than the others. It needs to know who you are because you've logged into your Google account in the first place. And then it says that it's set up using HTTPS, which means it's encrypted. So yeah, someone could hack it if they're clever, but Google are taking all steps to make sure that it doesn't get hacked. It's quite safe to save your passwords in Google Chrome if you want to. But my advice is, if you're doing that on a laptop, then you need to make sure that the laptop is encrypted and safe and secure as well. Because if your laptop goes missing, and they manage to get into your laptop and open up your Chrome, then effectively they've got access to all your passwords. Yeah. So stop them at the front door, encrypt your laptop first.
And John's got a couple of questions. Do you want to, I've unmuted you. Do you want to ask them?
Yeah, I plugged in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, great. Just clarifying on the password manager. Is that 100% reliable? Because the danger of putting all your eggs in one basket is if you lose the password and you've got access to data, would be my concern. And my other two questions, I'll treat this like the House of Commons. I'll give you all three. You can answer them in whichever sequence you like there then. So next one is Lark. I stumbled on Lark, and that's like a Zoom or a Lark, L-A-R-K. It's meant to be like a Zoom. I saw it on my iPhone. Nothing about that? No, okay. And the third thing is there are ways, aren't there, of apparently, that if, for instance, your bank writes and says, how to be careful about a fraudulent email, how do you know that actually isn't fraudulent in itself? And is there a way of looking up, there's some locked key or something you can look at that helps you work out whether it's come from the real thing?
Okay.
Back to you.
Okay, so your first question was about the password manager. I will start out by saying that nothing, no technology, no security service is 100% secure. It's as simple as that. So you can, for your own peace of mind, have a master password to allow you to log into the password manager. And if you happen to forget it, you can set up an alternative email address for it to verify you that way and equally verify you via your mobile phone. So to get into your account on a password manager is very tricky in the first place, but for your peace of mind, you can set up not only additional authentication, but also your own personal other email address as a backdoor should you forget your main password. The second question, I couldn't hear it quite clearly, but it was about Lark.
Lark, L-A-R-K.
I've not heard of it.
It's a video conferencing, syncing chat and calendar and stuff. So I think people are suggesting it instead of Zoom, but I haven't heard of it either.
Well, here's the thing. Any apps on a mobile phone, if they're free, by their very nature, are designed to do something else. The free apps, just like Candy Crush Saga, are designed to track your activity, perhaps even look at your browsing habits on that device. If you like looking at wardrobes, then you can be targeted with ads for wardrobes, and also access to your contacts and any other information on your device. So be wary, number one, of anything that's free. Number two is if you do decide to use those applications, just like Zoom is free for 45 minutes, for example, be cautious about what information you're sharing or talking about when using free apps. That's what I'll say about that. I don't have any experience of Lark itself, but there are lots of other solutions out there which will allow you to share and chat to colleagues. Even House Party is out there, or WhatsApp, you know, is a great tool. Yeah. People are so familiar with it, they don't think about the security aspects. And WhatsApp claimed to be encrypted at both ends. But again, you wouldn't share your bank details over WhatsApp necessarily, and your confidential information and your date of birth and where you were born, etc. It's just good practice to remain vigilant. Your third question was about an email. How to spot the fraudulent email.
Yeah.
Well, your bank perhaps has always and lots of times told you in every single correspondence that they will never email you a link directly. They will suggest that there's a new message waiting for you in your bank account and encourage you to go directly to that bank account. So anything that's anything that's financial related, my advice is go directly to HMRC or go directly to HSBC and do not click on any links in any email that you are suspicious of. It's better that you miss something than click on something. It's better that you delete something that you're unsure of, because if it's important, they can contact you again. But equally, banks say that they won't contact you via email to ask you to click on a link. Even HMRC don't send you links to click on themselves. They say go directly to HMRC. So that's best practice, and certainly that's part of the security training as well in terms of best practices and making sure your staff are aware of all of these little things. But if you're unsure as well, 50-50, feel free to just hover above the link just to see where it's taking you. And if it ends with a .ru, which is Russia, then you know it's probably suspicious, unless you have a Russian bank account.
In the same way, the comments. Can I come back with one?
Of course you can.
Can I come back? Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. I know in the lecture, but just in terms of an email, sometimes you can just look at the sender, and it could say, I'm based on the beach in the Maldives. Hope you're having a lovely time. You know that if that doesn't say Lloyds Bank, then you'll immediately know. So that's a lot of work. But apparently, there's some other little code at the top there. You can tell the lock code or something. My sister all mentioned it, where you can see whether something is genuine. That's where I was really getting.
Okay, are you talking about the?
Tell that something's come from a genuine.
Yes. Okay. So if you're talking about when you go to your browser website or the website and you see that green lock, here's the rub. Hackers now pay.
Thank you.
Hackers are now paying to have that green lock on their websites, even if they're fake websites. So if it looks like a fake HMRC or Barclays Bank page, they've done a very good job emulating it, and it looks like Barclays. Maybe the L and the A are swapped around so you don't spot it necessarily, and it's got that green padlock. Got to still be wary, because the hackers are so clever now, they're paying quite happily for security and that green padlock to make it look genuine. It's just crazy what they're doing. But you can hover on that green padlock, and if you're at Barclays site, you'd expect that green padlock, once you click on it and look at the details of that green padlock, to see if it's actually Barclays, and if it's not, then you know that it's a fraud. Okay.
That's exactly the point I was after. Thank you. Yeah.
Candy Crush. Okay. Candy Crush. Okay. I just used Candy Crush as an example. Richard has just asked about whether or not Candy Crush can access one's contacts. Perhaps we need to study the terms and conditions. Most people don't read them when they download these things. It definitely, I think, needs access to your location data or your location information. But yes, you can deny or stop applications accessing certain things in the privacy section of your mobile phones, but that would be mobile phone specific. I'm not sure exactly how I could articulate that to you, but certainly in the terms and conditions, when you download software, you'll see what you're giving it access to. And we can certainly look online, perhaps after this, to see what Candy Crush does have access to. But I just use it as an example, just to make sure that everyone is alert.
Facebook's a good one where in the settings, you can say you don't want to share your contacts, and then they'll send you a new update for your phone, and they've changed the privacy settings and they've added another thing. And basically you have to go back online to find somebody who finds they've just changed this in their terms and conditions. You now need to reset this, because they keep just nudging it and changing it. So they're moving the goalposts so they end up with your information, even if you think you've turned them all off.
You're absolutely right. In fact, there is again, share this with all your friends, colleagues, family, the whole lot. There is a setting under the Facebook privacy options whereby it also tracks all of the other websites that they have agreements with outside of Facebook, even when Facebook is closed. So I was astonished because I take my security and my privacy very seriously. I have told Facebook that under no circumstances are you allowed to access anything outside of Facebook. And you're right, these new terms and conditions have just come out. So I recommend, as Nicholas just pointed out, everyone looks at those security settings to see what Facebook is accessing, because you may not know how much information they've got. You can request the information that they've got on you just to run your eye down it, but I don't think it's always the truth. I'm sure they've got much more information on you than you can ever imagine.
And the other thing about Facebook is you should always set up your legacy. So if something happens to you, somebody else is allowed to access your page, because otherwise they won't shut it down. And that can be all sorts of problems. So if you were ill and wanted to shut it down or something, you need someone else to be able to access it.
I think that's a great tip, absolutely. Any other questions? Any for Michael's presentation?
The only thing I was going to add is we're back again next week for the AGM and some networking on Tuesday. And if I say 6 o'clock, Nicola, are you nodding like that, or?
Yes, hang on. I think it was 5, didn't we make it 5:30? Right.
Okay, well, we'll send out a reminder about it. But there's another event next week on Tuesday, definitely. I think it's 6, but maybe 5:30.
It could be.
We'll email everybody, and we'll email you all the copy of the slides as well, so you've got those.
And then in 2 weeks' time, we've got the no, we made it 5 o'clock.
Okay.
I think. It's because the AGM's at 5.
The AGM is good.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And then in 2 weeks' time, we've got the how to lead your company in difficult times.
Okay.
Which I need to put up as well.
Lovely. Okay. Well, we'll email everyone about next week's one. That's 5 o'clock next Tuesday as the next event.
Yeah. And that's virtual networking, so we can all bring our glass of wine. It won't be that next week.
Excellent. Well,
cool.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And thank you everybody for attending. I think
yes, thank you everybody.
We wind it up there.
Thanks, Michael.
Cheers, guys. All the best.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.
Bye, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.